Hey folks, I'm going to take you through a little walkthrough of a new track, or new-ish. Came out last month on Kadiji Records. It's a track called Spiraling, and the album it's off is called Also. I guess first thing I want to talk you through is where this track started, and the starting point was just a sample, which for whatever reason I called pommel clanks. Pommel, I think, is me misunderstanding a kind of ski lift, basically, a kind of chairlift. And I think in New Zealand we call them pommers. Like, I think it's supposed to have an A on the end, not EL. I think you call them drag lifts in Europe and America, but I'm not sure. So this 16-bar loop is, the foundation of the whole thing. And it even has a vocal in it that you might not hear when you're listening to the track. Here it comes. Yeah, okay, that's super quiet, but that was really uncomfortable. So this is a recording I made on a ski field. People were coming off the top of this lift. I was waiting for my partner. She hadn't arrived, and I just busted out my phone and made this recording. I'm sending this through a series of devices. I try not to be too specific about the tech I'm using. So this is Bitwig, but basically I'm sending things through devices just to kind of trim the signal and gate various aspects, so really we're only getting the loudest parts coming through. There's that big chunk of wind noise there, and I actually quite liked it in the mix, so I was like, stuff it, I'm just going to leave it, let it be there. I trimmed and adjusted the timing of the audio file so that it's actually on the beat, so that clank is always on the first beat of each bar. And then I'm running it through basically kind of spectral filters, so the frequency splitter and a loudness splitter, and putting different effects on different things based on basically, for that second piece, it's based on the loudness of the sounds coming through. So the quietest parts are going through this big chain. And I may as well say right now that one of the reasons I thought I'd pick this track to do a walkthrough of is that I did a lot of audio design, so a lot of sort of processing and tweaking and things. So there's very sort of quiet and gentle delays on things here, and that's only on the quietest things coming through spectrum-wise, so the things that show in green, mostly the high end. Middle part's running through an amp emulator that's kind of crushing it, making it grimy. Dragging things around. And then the loudest peaks are running through a frequency splitter. And then only things that meet a certain frequency range are being put into a kind of Leslie style rotary speaker kind of emulation that's wobbling everything around. So yeah, it's just kind of creating a sort of shimmeriness and space to something that was a completely mono recording. And then all of that's running into a third-party plugin called Trackspacer, which is basically a sidechain EQ. So when the bass is playing, I'll put the bass in the mix. To rewind. When the bass is in the mix, you'll see Trackspacer's just making sure that the bass frequencies aren't competing. So it's letting the bass line come through more clearly in the mix. You can easily do this stuff in Bitwig natively, but I already own Trackspacer and it really does the job, so nice one. Yeah, so got that as a loop, and then I just started exploring sort of harmonic material on top, and that's the main thing, the sort of main harmonic aspects of the track, really. There's what we call plonkiness, or what I called plonkiness. There's a chord progression, and there's bass line. And none of those things changes throughout the track. I basically just set up a process and let it run. So the plonkiness, if I go there, this is another example where there's quite a lot going on in terms of the kind of sound design, I suppose. It's a relatively simple pattern, and why it goes long in the track is because there's some variation on velocity, so basically the loudness and emphasis of notes throughout, and the sound itself is actually 3 different sounds, so 3 different kinds of marimbas. And I just took preset instruments that exist in Bitwig, but then I've obviously just messed with them quite a lot. So I've stacked up 3 of them together, and if I solo one of them, this is on the left-hand channel, or towards the left. And it's about to drop an octave. Made a liar out of me. Okay, I don't know why that didn't happen. Alright, but anyway, this is a wavetable using a marimba, and in this case, I'm not doing too much to the notes, but I'm feeding the results through kind of a resonator, a dynamic processor, so kind of like a compressor, into a multi-band splitter that's then putting distortion on only the high end, and then running the results of that into an EQ. So if I were to kill all of that, you'll hear so relatively different kind of sound. Whoop. Clicking in the wrong place. And then one thing I do to all 3 of these instruments is I've got this modulation happening that changes the pitch. And I'm doing that using a thing called a note transpose device in Bitwig. And basically what you're seeing on the screen is when these blue bars go up, the value of the transpose amount goes up on each of those instruments. And what I did is I actually pushed the transpose in different directions on each of those 3 instruments so that it kind of sort of fans out harmonically into a kind of a chord, whereas normally they're all playing around the same pitch. And the other thing then I'm doing is I'm driving it all into a key filter which constrains the notes to a particular scale. So in this case the track's in G Dorian, it basically makes sure that even when those notes get transposed, it just basically pushes them to the nearest semitone if they're out of the key or out of the scale. So I won't go through all the details of all the effects on each one, but so this marimba's over to the right more. And the key thing I wanted to point out here is that this one is delayed by 4/16, so like a full beat in the bar. And so, yeah, it's taking the same notes, but it's pushing them out by 1 beat, so that, you know, they're obviously delayed. And then this ricochet effect basically sort of grabs those notes and then throws them out when it's enabled. And I've got a modulation that's turning that on and off, so that sometimes the notes just land according to what the MIDI clip would say, and sometimes they kind of scatter. Yeah. And then, so you've got those 2, and they're kind of panned either side, and then there's a much quieter one in the middle, and that's delayed again. So the one that's in the middle is pushed out by 7/16, which is a pretty odd amount when you're in 4/4. And by default, everything's an octave higher than the others, but tuned down a little, and again then kind of just constrained back into key. So it's basically always a harmony on top. So just letting that go for a minute. So that's, I mean, this is really the whole track in my head. Like, this is what it's all about. So then on top of all of that, one of the other things that is then happening right at the start is I just exported a copy of that plonkiness. And so I've just got two copies of that. One of them I've sped up, one of them I've slowed down. So basically pushed up an octave, pushed down an octave. So these then are really grunged through different effects. Grimy Crush, it's called. And into convolution reverb. Yeah, and so that just creates that sort of one-off intro effect. And so that's a bit of a little shortcut, I guess, I have for myself when I'm wondering about an intro, is that I'll often bounce out some part of the track that's going to come next and manipulate that at the start just as a kind of one-off event. Yeah. Then the next thing is this convolution chords, or convolve chords, I've called them. And it really sounds very basic, and then when I start to actually look at the effects and things, it looks completely ridiculous to me. So the basic thing we've got going on is a phase distortion synth, so a kind of FM, and it's just playing these chords, and these are going to be in G Dorian. I've done some inversions like I usually do, and I've got a 16 bar progression going on here, so there's a few kind of extra little, I don't know what you call those, but like little incidental chords that sort of just give it a bit of flavour here. Sometimes it's so washed out you can't even really hear what's going on in terms of those shifts. And so then I've done this big muck around with bringing in MIDI from that plonkiness channel and then using those notes to change the cutoff frequency of the phase distortion. So change the frequency of these chords. So when this plonkiness thing is playing, we should see this frequency knob down the bottom goes up and down when the notes come through, according to the original MIDI clip notes, so not the kind of delays and things that I was showing you just now. And it's pretty convoluted and crazy amount of effort for something that I think is not very noticeable, but it does change the sound. So the chords get a kind of spike in frequency every time the plonkiness is coming through. And very quickly how I had to do that was basically, and this is from some video and I've no idea where I found this, but you know, some video out there, could be Polarity is one of the classic Bitwig YouTubers out there, or it might be Tash Teachers, or yeah, I'm not sure. But essentially, this thing here is set up to capture all the notes, and then there's all these things that sort of then hide those notes and turn them off again until we get all the way over to the actual synth, and then we are receiving those notes from that first device. And in the middle here is a thing that picks up the plonkiness notes, provides them to the FX grid, but then doesn't send them out at all. So this tiny little contraption here, all it's doing is receiving each time a note comes in and triggering an envelope when that note comes in. And then I'm using that envelope to modulate the frequency amount. So yeah, it's all... I have to say, when I sat down and was looking at this again and trying to think how I was going to talk it through, I was like, man, this is a lot of faffing around for just a small thing. It really took me a minute to even remember why I had this succession of sort of receivers and then filters that were cutting those receivers out again and on and on. But yeah, as I say, the guts of it is that each time a note plays on the plonkiness channel, it changes the cutoff frequency on the chords. That's the outcome. So yes, we move on. So then I've got this bass up, bass up. But it's relatively quiet in the track. And you can probably see in the MIDI clip, it's just playing these long sustained notes. And as per the fact that I put ARP on the end, I decided that I would send them into an arpeggiator. And it's not changing the, it's not doing the classic arpeggio thing of going up and down in pitch. It's just triggering the same note with no variation to the note, as in the pitch value. But I've got a couple of different things happening here modulation-wise that change the speed of the steps through the arpeggio. So, normally like a classic arpeggio would just be sort of eighth notes or something, just going dug, 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 dug. So this is shifting when you see a blue bar. So this is what's called a step. So it's basically a little step sequence, and when the bar happens, it's changing this kind of note value here. So it might go from, that's a minim, it might go from a minim to a crotchet. And then here it might change what the actual note dividers are from, so the kind of units go from a crotchet to a dotted crotchet or to triplets. So it's basically moving between straight, dotted, and triplet values of whatever this is. And I've got two different ones that are manipulating that note amount so that at different times in the track there's these irregularities that happen. Yeah. If I were to kill the arpeggiator, you'd just hear these straight notes. Pretty subtle, but it's sustained if you can hear it if you're listening on headphones. And if I was to turn off the modulation, you'd hear just perfectly regular. All the echoes happening. So then later in the track you get this arpeggio coming in. So let's just hear that in context and then I'll talk through that one. So that comes in at the same time as that skittering percussion. And believe it or not, some recordings of a dishwasher. But before we get to that, let's talk about the arpeggio there. Yeah, I really like the idea of just kind of bringing something in just to sort of add some variety and then you take it out almost straight away. So you can see there from those volume envelopes, it's just sort of rolling in and then it goes again. And I've just taken the chord progression from, the convolve chords above and, sending that into an arpeggiator so that it, plays one note at a time as an arpeggio. And in terms of what's actually happening in the track, we've got a vocoder and the modulation source is a vocal sample that I made. And then the carrier wave is just a sawtooth synth. And there's a bunch of randomization and modulations of other kinds in LFO here that are changing the shape of that saw messing with the phase mounts and so on, and sync amount. So yeah, it's got that real gnarliness you get with a hard sync kind of sound. But the vocal sound is quite hilarious on its own, so I'll just swallow my pride and play you the vocal sound that is being used as the modulator. And what I'm doing is I'm jumping, so I've got a modulation source here that basically on a note-by-note basis is picking a start point in the sample and using that as the start. And so the sample itself, if we listen to it, yeah. So that's me trying to be the Dalai Lama or Dalai Lama. And that's the point being that it's basically like a formant or vowel-shaped filter. And latest version Bitwig's actually got one, but it's basically, it's modulating the shape of that sawtooth by the shape of my mouth. And as I say, if we watch this yellow bar here on the bottom of the screen, when I play notes, it's jumping around. Yeah, there you go. So it jumps to a different start point, and each of those white bars progressing across is each of the notes as it plays. And so each note's kind of picking out a different shape of my mouth, basically, that becomes the modulation source that shapes the synth. So that's pretty fun. It's kind of, it's exactly what a vocoder is most commonly used for, I guess, messing around with your voice. But in this case, I was messing around wordlessly rather than, the classic thing where you, I don't know, doing craft work or Africa Bambaataa or whatever. Africa Bambaataa? I don't think he ever did that. Anyway, moving right along, skittery percussion. This is basically a drum machine with a whole lot of little slices of percussion in it. I don't know if we're even going to hear them. Let's see if I jump forward so that the volume's up. Basically, I took a sample, and this is of me banging a phone pole, like a telecoms antenna, with contact mics taped to the antenna. And so I've got Bitwig's got a nice slicer, just sliced everything into little pieces, and then this drum machine is jumping around to basically trigger different notes from that sequence. And the way I'm actually doing that, if we look at the actual progression, it's always just triggering the same note, and that note's kind of roughly in the middle of the keyboard. But then I'm actually using modulation sources. Whoop, in the wrong place. I'm actually using modulation sources to transpose the note, and basically a sort of a sample and hold effect that's picking one note and then changing the pitch each time a new note comes in. And so that's basically picking semi-randomly, but it's actually predictable in the sense that each time I hit play, it's going to do the same thing. It's just that a human's never going to keep track of it, We're never going to predict what happens there. Yeah, and I quite like that idea of like kind of just split a sound into many parts. Split a sound into many parts across the drum machine, and then use this kind of note transpose trick to pick out things randomly. And just to be really clear, all of those samples are triggering at their original pitch, so it's not like the note value that's coming in is changing the pitch. It's just picking a different sound. Yeah. And you can see that as they light up down here. Cool. So I think, there's two more little sounds. One's pretty nothing. It's just a little tinky echo sound, percussion at the end. And that's just literally a little hi-hat sound, the original sound here. Yeah. And that's just going through a delay with the, well, sorry, there's echo, there's a phaser or a flanger, and then there's a dynamic EQ here that's being modulated, and then, and these are just Bitwig presets for those who use Bitwig. And then I've got another kind of steps modulation here, which is changing very short delay taps. I don't even know if you'll hear it. Good times. And then just to point to what's actually happening here in terms of the automation, I'm fading in a high pass filter. So it's going from no frequencies being audible. We go back to bar 57, and then slowly lowering the cutoff filter, so it's bringing in from the highest sounds to the full sort of range. And sometimes I like doing that. Sometimes I like having two sounds that are going in opposite directions. So a low pass filter is opening up in one, and a high pass filter is opening up on the other. And so you're kind of meeting in the middle. Yeah, sometimes it's just more fun than just a volume fade. So then the final thing is there's dishwasher sounds. I honestly think this was just one where the dishwasher was running in the background, and I kind of thought, oh yeah, that's sort of in tune or something. I've taken that part from the end and I'm playing it forwards, and then I'm playing it backwards. So it kind of plays forwards and then alternates, plays backwards. And then both of those are sent into some effects, including a delay, two different delays. This is another third-party plugin, good old Valhalla delay. But otherwise, yeah, it's just going into something that's playing with the volume here. And this is kind of like a ducking effect, basically. So this tool is just changing the volume of the sound, and it's receiving the volume of that original Pommer chair sample. And so when the Pommer chair is coming through, it's going to reduce the volume of this kind of wash of dishwasher. Wash, ho, ho, ho. So if I play it, it's pretty quiet. And it's just this sort of gentle texture, really. And you can see here it's changing the volume. So it's actually going the other way. I didn't realize that. Okay, so it's loudest when the other sample's happening. So it's sort of adding texture to the existing samples. Yeah, and so that just fades in towards the very, very end of the track. So that's really it. I hope that's of interest. So there's quite a few little things happening there. There's not necessarily that many layers when you look at it as a kind of set of instruments, or if I flip over to the mixer and you see across here, it doesn't look like all that much going on, especially if you close up the dishwasher. So what's that? This one's not even in the track, so it's only like, what, 8 things? 9, 10? But yeah, you can see that through the use of kind of layering and things within any given track, you can kind of create sort of, I don't know, hopefully a bunch of interest and a little bit of density, I guess. Yeah, so I'll stop there. I hope you enjoyed that. And once again, yeah, the track is called Spiraling, and it's available on an album called Also.